Hi, and welcome once again to What's the Damage, companion show to the incredibly well-known and popular D&D real play show, Roll for Damage. 100% gluten-free now. So, celiacs, it's for you too. So on Friday, the Shields of Twilight continued their mission to track down this mysterious and possibly dead friend of Lex's. Oriana and Ball left the comfort of the library to help their friends snoop around in a storage facility in search of clues. What they found, however, was trouble. Um, they did manage to finally steal that ledger, which was giving them so much trouble last time, and to led them straight into the treacherous jaws of death. Or not death, because that got retconned. A tough battle with some creepy brain eating assholes left Quinn not dead, but badly cursed. Rushing to help their friend, the party stopped off at the Temple of Asmodeus, where Baltaim agreed to serve in return for staving off Quinn's death just a little bit longer. We'll be talking about that right now. And then a little bit later, we'll be talking about the weird, wild, and non-standard D&D settings. As always, stick around after the stream for stuff and links and cool shit. I'm your host, Truth Venson, and this is What's the Damage? Welcome back. We've got two exciting guests for you today. We've got the effervescent Jake who plays Oriana, and we've got the absolutely fantastic Cory who plays Sinric. So, guys, you did a little bit of snooping, did a little bit of thievery, did a little bit of reading, did a little bit of not quite dying. What's the damage this time?
I mean, what isn't the damage?
That's a fair point.
Let's see. We got now two people that have quote unquote sold their soul. But then again, would that beg the question? Do they have a soul to sell?
Gonna get metaphysical.
Pretty sure Tharizdun already owns that real estate. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, that was my point.
Didn't.
But we got some good information out of everything, and we're on a good track, I think. Aside from a minor setback.
Really minor. I'm remembering something. I'm not sure if this is like in the D&D canon or a fairy tale, but the concept of having multiple claims on a soul. Wasn't there a story somewhere where like some guy sold his soul to multiple parties and then they just fought over it and he was fine? Is that from something?
It sounds like it would be like a fairy tale. Yeah,
that feels like a very Hollywood movie-ish kind of thing. Guy who sells his soul to multiple people and all that stuff.
I could see that in like a movie where this guy is like, I'm just going to sell my soul because, what's a soul? It's not like I can touch it.
Sounds like a good Nicolas Cage movie, honestly.
You bite your tongue. Give people
Sorceress.
ideas. You'll give them ideas. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, so you guys did a bunch of stuff. But Oriana and Baltine started off in the library where you had split from the party the previous episode. I was wondering, there didn't appear to be that much hesitation when Baltime and Orion were leaving again, but you weren't at the library very often. You did give up a quite valuable item to get in the first place. Does Oriana regret like selling her rapier so cheaply for like a couple of hours, I think, overnight?
If she had known that the party was going to basically, how to word this nicely, guilt trip her into making sure the party doesn't run into issues, she probably would have just stayed with the party. But it seemed like we weren't getting anywhere with this case. So for her, it's like, I don't really use this sword that much. They're not planning on leaving the city. They're not planning on doing anything drastic, as far as I'm aware. I'm going to get a head start on this research because we have a buttload of research to do. So that was her kind of intent of going in. So had she known that, by the end of dinner time, the party would have been saying, hey, there's a chance we might be getting into some pretty deep trouble. Can you guys come out? Then she probably wouldn't have gone in.
Hindsight, it's 2020. Yeah, so like, is that the reason why she split from party, thinking, well, nothing's happened so far, so nothing's gonna happen for a little while longer?
It didn't seem, yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things where it felt like, to her, everybody was kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, in a way. We kept trying to come up with ideas and then saying, no, let's do this idea instead. No, let's do this idea instead. And it got to the point for her where the shade she has been receiving from Perry and Quinn was not going unnoticed, and she just felt like maybe they just need time away from me. Maybe if I get a head start on this research, I can bring something of value to the group. And and that's why she offered to not research her stuff. She wanted to see, hey, what do you guys want me to look into first, because I'm going to get a head start on the research.
Gotcha. So sort of adjacent to the issues that Oriana's been having with some members of the party, last episode saw Baltaim kind of like reaching out once again to Oriana, being like, hey, if you need to talk to somebody, I'm here, which Oriana didn't really take him up on. Why doesn't she want to confide in Baltaim, or is she just like not feeling it, especially with anyone?
The more recent issues where I was not 100% clear on what Oriana would and wouldn't be able to say, so I didn't want to say things in character and have DM come in and say, oh, well, she can't actually say that. She would be prevented from saying that.
You could have asked what you could say, surely.
You could have been that's actually what I did. Yeah. That's actually what I did. So between the last session we had and the session before that, I sat down and talked with Serenity and tried to figure out, like, this is what she would want to say to people. How would I need to change this? And we talked about it and we figured that stuff out. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, none of that comes up because immediately we were running into problems. So she's willing to talk about it, at least with Baltaim. And she probably will once,
I mean, you have to now. Baltaim's very involved.
Yeah, once the current emergency is taken care of, she's going to talk to him about it. So
be like, hey, here's the lowdown on your new servitude.
More or less. I mean, he's going to be asked to do different things, I think. I don't think it's a package deal. But I think we'll see.
Yeah.
You're going to talk about your predicament using words that you can't use to talk about your predicament. I kind of want to be around for that conversation. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, I assume you will be. Probably happen on stream.
I mean, I'm more or less. She's just going to say, like, hey, I'm need to do this favor for them. I promise to do it. This is the favor. Can you help me get it done? I mean, that's all she really wants to say.
Mhm.
She wants to talk about the thing. She can't talk about the deal. At least I don't think she can talk about the deal with Baltaim, even though Baltaim's now made one. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think we'll talk more about this later, but I am curious, like, is Oriana hatching a plan for like getting around her gag order?
Not entirely, not yet at least. For her, it seems like she's mostly just being taught a lesson. Like, hey,
Is it
you
not
need
a test, perhaps?
essentially, yeah, that's what she thinks it is. A sort of, hey, nothing's free. You can't just, get something for nothing. You need to be careful with your words because words are power. That was very much a clear motif throughout all of
Mm-hmm.
the tenets and means of worship when it came to what she was told at the temple. So whatever the test ends up being, she's aware that this is a test. She's aware that this isn't, some power hungry asshole who wants to, take full advantage of the fact that Oriana is now his thrall. She knows that he's trying to teach her a lesson. And she's just trying to figure out both what the lesson is and how to learn from it.
I think I know what the lesson is, but I'm not going to say.
I mean, I have my own theories, but
cool beans. But actually, speaking of the power of words and like Oriana's thoughts about that, I thought it was nice to see her do like a little bit of lying and charming to that guard who she tripped and fell onto. She doesn't seem to rely that much on her charismatic abilities, even though she is a bard. Is this something like she's hoping to practice more in the future, or?
I would say it's more she hasn't been given the opportunity that much. A lot of times when we've been faced with a situation that's of a social nature, at least pretty much since we left Zarithamar, it's been we're not in a position to talk ourselves out of this or be somewhat sneaky or deceptive with our wordplay here. Like one example that comes to mind was the incident after the marketplace when the Desert Rose was taking them in, and she wanted to try and use her words to try and get the party out of trouble. But that wasn't really a situation where that would work. I mean, they killed people. You can't talk your way out of that.
They could have been bad people, you don't know.
Asmodeus made me do it. No. But that was the last time we really had an opportunity to do that. That wasn't specifically related to another character. Like, theoretically, Oriana probably could have played up her charisma at the Jilra, but that was Perry's people. And she didn't want to step on Perry's toes in that instance. She wanted Perry to be able to figure out what her journey is, what her goals are on her own. And then, I mean, she's been trying to be charismatic in Zuma, failing for the most part, aside from that one interaction with the guard. But yeah,
that's when it mattered.
It is when it
mattered. That was when it mattered. Pretty clutch. Would you say that Oriana now has a moral imperative as a worshiper or follower of Asmodeus to talk, be charming?
She's definitely going to try that more. Before this, she obviously had no clue what it meant to be a follower of him. And now that she knows that that's something that can be seen as sort of an expression of your worship, is using your words and getting things to go your way, or being a leader by using your charisma and words and your voice to accomplish that. She's definitely focusing more on that now. So I think Whereas before she didn't always step up to the plate for that, she's now going to be the one who steps up to the plate for that.
Cool. Well, looking forward to that and whatever trouble she gets in the process. Wonderful trouble.
Just don't
Anyway.
talk us out of any rewards.
Talk us
Don't worry, I'm
into
not
bigger
watching you.
rewards. Yeah. Oh, did Dobby almost do that once?
No, I did that.
Oh, wait, was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
after you saved the rich kid way back when?
No, that was in well, I don't think it was Cageborough yet. It was the city before Zarithmar, with the Ifrit and the lady who asked us to go save her daughter.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember that. Too noble for your own good. So, speaking of Cynric, would he have really roofied that poor guy?
I don't consider that roofing. I mean, that was a love potion. It would have been a infatuation. And after seeing the effects it had on Baltaim, or it had like no detrimental effects, I mean, it could be safely administered and then like watched until the guy was, done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I don't think Cynric would have had much of a problem with that because A, it wouldn't have hurt the guy, and B, it would have, got our means to our ends.
Yeah, I think we saw a little bit of a contrast between Cynric and some of the other characters during like the planning session for the whole giant ledger heist, wherein Cynric was like, okay, let's steal it. Let's blow something up and cause a distraction. Let's use drugs. And everyone else was like, no.
Well, could you classify a love potion as a drug?
Yes.
It's not like it's an illegal substance. You could buy it at the store openly. It wasn't like an illegal substance.
I mean, aspirin's not illegal.
Yeah.
Still
Aspirin also doesn't get you high. But talk about that contrast for a second, because Cynric, I feel like, was very, okay, well, here are some ways we can do this. They're not legal, technically, but...
No, I mean, yeah, good doesn't necessarily mean legal, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a lot of cases, you can be a good character and do something bad for the sake of saving someone, not like necessarily murdering something, but in the case of what we did was stealing a tablet.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing too bad about that.
I mean,
obviously,
I wasn't recommending like blowing up an entire city block, people included,
no.
But maybe like a trash can outside of the store.
Just set a little trash can on fire.
Yeah, something to create, a reason for someone to come outside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I thought the contrast was actually between Cynric, like proposing very standard D&D-esque mischief, and everyone else being like, absolutely not. We are law-abiding citizens. We will not even pay this guy for information.
And the thing is, we're not even citizens, nor do we really understand the laws and customs of most of the places where we go. So in my head, it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to work on a code and not necessarily what's lawful, because those laws can literally change from location to location. Like,
true in real life.
We were just in Cageborough, we murdered a bunch of people and got deputized. Now we're in a place, so I mean, yeah, granted that's an extreme, case, but yeah.
You probably wouldn't get deputized if you murdered some people in the street here.
No, but the situation is different than it was in a city known for, thievery and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was my...
To be fair, Cageborough also wasn't really we got deputized. It was more like we became civil servants.
Is that not the same thing?
We were tasked with enforcing the laws of the city while we're there.
Yes, but we're also, if we're there and they need us to go do something, that we need to go do it. Like, hey, we're out running low on food. Can you guys go get us more food?
I mean, that's what deputies do too, isn't it? It's not to do errands.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's all very Wild West. It's quite loosey-goosey.
But yeah, that's kind of my prerogative as how I look at it. I mean, sometimes doing the right thing for a particular mission doesn't exactly coincide with doing a good thing.
Yeah. Cool beans. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so then let's talk about the battle to come then, since that followed quite fast after the whole wandering around looking for the proper storage unit thing. Yeah, so these bitches really wanted your brains. Let's hear about it.
I mean, they had tentacles. That was, a thing. Actually, I don't. The fight was an interesting one because I don't think any of the creatures individually were extremely dangerous, but the fact that they were smarter creatures and played to advantages was, that's what made them more dangerous. I mean, immediately disabling 2 of our party members just because they were sitting in the dark and preventing light sources from being active. I mean, that in itself reduced our numbers, reduced our viability. The fact that they had AoE style magics, I mean, right there, that keeps us, that's addresses our issue of clumping up. So, we're forced to spread out. And 1v1, some of those guys are a little bit tougher to handle. And then you had the mind control aspects. So it turned, us against each other. It was more of a fight to think about than actually like throw swords against.
Mm-hmm. Quite complicated.
I would agree with that. Yeah. It's I don't know if those were true illithids or not. DM hasn't given us any kind of indication if those are modified or anything. Which is kind of a scary thing to think about, that we're at the point where we can fight 4 illithids. Because there's some nasty stuff at that kind of level.
I have a head in my bag, so I mean, we can find out.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does anybody have Speak with Dead anymore?
Well, I mean, we
I
can
don't
show
think
it
Quinn...
to people.
Yeah, just go around the street, be like, hey, do you know what this is?
Well, I mean, I can tell you right now, first thing we do when we get back into the library, weird tentacle-faced things.
Just hit fancy Google.
Like I said, I thought it was an interesting battle because, I mean, you're forced to look at your surroundings. I mean, just as simple as lighting a torch for, like, me and Campion goes a long way. And I know Campion used the spell, to grant dark vision, but it's one of those where it's like, yeah, you have to think about your environment around. So it could have gone very badly. I don't think it went great, but I don't think it went poorly either.
There are 2 things Cynric needs to be the best fighter possible: goggles of night vision and wings of flying. So I think when next time we find ourselves in a magic shop, we try and find one of those 2 things.
Excuse me, can you make this man fly?
Or
I mean, see in the dark.
I think this is more like the point of our group, like, kind of like dynamic right now. There are people that can have that capability, and just a matter of allocating resources towards one another instead of towards selves.
That is one thing I've noticed about us. For a while there, we were doing pretty good on like spell prepping and talking to each other about what we would have available and what we should have available. Now everybody kind of just preps what they want and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so the battle went bad, but not that bad, not as bad as it could have. So after the retcon, which we'll probably go into more detail on Friday, Quinn is not dead, but is cursed and unconscious. And you guys rushed to the Temple of Asmodeus because that was closest, and there was some kind of effect which was killing him, but they were able to to stop it.
Stay it.
I believe to stay it temporarily to give you guys more time. Yeah, so like Oriana, was the decision to like suggest the Temple of Asmodeus purely because it was right there, or because this is kind of your home temple now, or?
It was right there. It was same district. If she knew where Bane's temple was, since she's realized now that Quinn has sort of changed sides, if you will, she would have recommended to take him there. But since at the time, especially since this is before the retcon where he is dead, she's just thinking we need that spell that we used on Cynric to prevent his body from getting any further decayed, because then there's going to be other problems on top of it. So that was the reason why. It was just, it's the closest place, and I honestly, I think the only temples Oriana really knows about in the city right now are Torog's and Asmodeus. Those are the only two she's actually ever been to. So for her, I mean, it was just a question of, this is where I know we need to go.
Yeah.
It'll take hours to go to other districts. So even if you guys know of one that's another temple, it has to be in this district, or we're just not. We're going to have to carry a dead Quinn through a city.
Yeah, or not dead, a dying Quinn.
Now dying, yeah. But I mean, at the time, I'm still.
Well, it actually makes more sense if he was actively dying.
True. Yeah, it makes even more sense even with the retcon. So.
Yeah. So like Oriana, like brushing dying Quinn to the temple. Did she was it just pure desperation, or did she have like a plan in place for what she was going to use to persuade the priest? Or because obviously like it wouldn't be free.
Obviously it wouldn't be it wouldn't be free, and her first thought was that he would just take it as okay, well, now you owe me more time, so whatever the test ends up being, it gets that much harder. That was her thought at first, and that's why she eventually said the phrase again. And then he said no, and her thought was he wants another person. And at that point, I'm pretty sure Oriana couldn't warn everyone about what he wanted. So she just kind of sat there realizing that she's fucked up. She, she's put somebody else in the position that she is in now.
Well, apparently if you get a third one, you get like your little punch card thing.
I have no idea what DM meant with that, and I'm equally parts excited and scared to try.
I
thought it was pretty straightforward what she said, but I
have a feeling I know what she means. I have a feeling if I get another person to take my place, essentially, that I'm free to go.
I don't think it had anything to do with that. I think it was if you get another one of us to join in, that he has the ability to fix Quinn. That was the buy-in. The one favor was to stay it. The next one was to fix it.
Potentially. I mean, that I could see it being that too, but Oriana knows. No. Sorry, DM.
DM has confirmed.
DM has confirmed. I understand that, and I fucked that up. But again, this was coming from Oriana was trying to just add on a little extra to hers, essentially what she considered a small favor for a small favor. She wasn't thinking a big favor for a big favor. And now that she knows that he would be willing to do it for someone else's service, she's hesitant to do that. Number one, because I don't think she can convince anyone left in the group to do it. And number two, because she knows that that's not what Quinn would want. Quinn would not want people selling their service for him.
Plus, Oriana still, I think, does not fully know the radius of her service, or how big it is, what it encompasses exactly.
She does not
vague.
know. Yeah, she does not know that, and that's why she wasn't willing to put other people on the line. But as soon as Baltaim said, "Excuse me," What can we do? She knew it was screwed, so she just
Yeah.
couldn't do anything at that point.
Yeah. So, before we move on, I was wondering, sort of asked about Oriana's gag order and what she plans to do about that. But kind of like this whole bondage servitude thing, is she percolating a plan for getting out of this? And will the addition of one of her friends perhaps inspire her to do that more?
Um, she's willing to do one or two more favors, almost as if like a penance. So after the book is taken care of, if it's not a okay, you've done what you need to do, you're free to go now or whatever, then she'd probably wait to see what the next thing asked is, and at that point she would start formulating a plan.
So
In
she's
her
biding her time.
a little bit, she knows this is a test of some kind. She's trying to figure out what that test is, and if this ends up being a thing where like she gets a feeling like 3 months down the line, hey, can you swing by Zuma, and just
Give me
and
coffee, real quick.
she doesn't want to be stuck with this forever. But she's trying to figure out what is the test exactly, and she thinks what she has been asked to do so far has been part of that test. She was asked to perform music, which she said is what she does. Okay, so that's obviously leading into, we're not going to ask you to do anything terrible. Here's this really straightforward thing that you like to do that I want you to do for us. And then when she came back to do the favor the second time, and she casually mentioned that maybe getting a book was not the best use of her talents, and he said, okay, sweep the floors. That's when she realized, yes, this is definitely a test, and I am not doing this correctly.
I'm absolutely sure I know what the test is, but I'm not going to say.
I have a feeling I know too, but
Well, what do you think it is?
I think it's a test of her willingness to. I have two ideas.
Mhm.
One is that this is just a test for her to see if she can learn what the tenets are and understand what they mean. So far, he's asked her to do things that are technically within her wheelhouse to do. Be persuasive, use your music, things like that. The other theory I have is that it's a test in that, hey, you need to find your own damn way out of this, or I'm going to keep you on the hook for as long as I damn well please.
Interesting.
So whether that's find a way to trick him into letting her go, or, like, I don't know what the specifics of that test would be other than just finding a way to get out of it.
Well, I'm sure we'll all find out in the future. Awesome. And with that, we're going to move on to our topic for today, which is non-standard D&D settings. So things like sci-fi, steampunk, on a boat, high seas, modern, like you name it. This is kind of a little bit related to our topic from last week, which was horror in D&D, but sort of like broadens that. So first question, have you guys like ever played in a game that had a non-high fantasy setting?
When you say
Yes.
like non-high fantasy, I mean, you mean like
Not classic.
mundane, or like not like D&D realm?
Just not classic D&D. Not classic swords and sorcery.
I have. I've done a modified Star Wars. Like, it still used the D&D rule book, but it was sort of flavor text to Star Wars. So like a lot of the spells were force powers and things like that. I've also done a pseudo post-apocalyptic setting that was more of a one-shot. Wasn't very good. That was more on the DM. The DM was not a very good DM. But yeah, there was that, which was again still D&D rules, just in a more sci-fi-ish post-apocalypse setting. Like, instead of the Warforged being this animated piece of machinery through magic and stuff, it was, no, you're just a robot.
You're just a robot.
Yeah.
You're an automaton.
Essentially, yeah.
Hi, robot.
Yeah, I can't recall anything that wasn't, considered like fantasy or, science or, stuff like that were the focus. Most of it's all been just like understanding, okay, this is magic, this is how it works, or it's just a reflavoring of, magic, and, this again is how it works.
Yeah, I'd argue that not all fantasy is necessarily high fantasy and not necessarily D&D-esque fantasy, which is very like, it's sword and sorcery fantasy essentially.
Yeah, I think the issue that I'm having there answering that is fantasy is such a broad stroke term.
True. But I do mean sword and sorcery, high fantasy. You got your classic dragons and stuff.
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, I think the closest thing to that was, oh God, I'm going to date myself here. But back in high school when we converted pretty much like, if you remember Zoids into a like D&D setting, basically giant robots that you piloted, like animal robots.
Wait, is that an arcade game?
No, it was like a Japanese kind of like anime.
Like Transformers?
Manga. No, they didn't transform. They were just animals that you piloted.
Like Pokemon?
No, they were like giant robot animals that, you sat in a cockpit and piloted. So like instead of a fireball, you would have cannon, and it was stuff like that. So
fascinating.
Vaguely remember hearing about Zoids in my childhood.
So
never heard of Zoids.
Yeah. So I mean, we did stuff like that even when I was in high school, and I'd say that would be the closest to like not fantasy as you're describing.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting though. How did you actually like convert like mecha into D&D?
I mean, it was just a matter of like, you guess like, okay, well, how much health would something have because it's giant, made out of metal, and then you just kind of like, I mean, we were kids, so it's not like it was scientifically accurate.
You weren't like,
it's like, okay, well, this weapon would kind of work like this ability, so this is, the damage we'll use for it.
Interesting.
One thing I've always wanted to try was modern D&D, which is it's the modern world, and really just flavor text all the spells into like gadgets and things like that. Like wizards are just,
programmers,
super intelligent programmers who hack computers and things like that. Artificers literally are just inventors who build their spells. I mean, it's basically what artificers already are, but without the concept of like magic and fantasy and just pure technology.
Cyberpunk almost.
Kinda, yeah, kinda.
Cyberpunk and make it D&D.
Wizards are essentially net runners at that point.
Yeah, that's cool. So with modern settings in particular, how do you fit the mechanics of D&D around like a world where you have like the internet or cell phones or planes? Like you can travel much faster, you can look up anything at any point. So like what's the point of an intelligence roll? You can Google it. Like how do you make that D&D?
I mean, for me, I would, using that example, I would use an intelligence check to see how good of information you can find. I mean, if you think about like the real world, I could go to Google and search up, I don't know,
sausage.
Let's just say
chicken sausage.
Let's just say political facts. Right? I mean, you can make a whole campaign off of like what's happened with politics in the last 5-6 years, but like your intelligence check would be, hey, are you finding good resources? Or are you finding things that are like super heavily biased towards one side or the other?
So your intelligence check is how well you use like Boolean terms.
Essentially, yeah.
Or how well you can decipher fact from fiction.
That too.
Clever.
So I mean, at that point, you'd almost be using, well, I guess you would be using intelligence for intelligence, but like reading comprehension as opposed to like an actual D&D skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess when you put it that way, it's not that different than what you're doing in standard D&D. It's just a
It
little bit
would be an
creative.
investigation check.
Yeah.
It's one of the beauties about D&D. It's the rule, the basic rule mechanics are so simple that you can kind of apply them to anything. You just have to have an imaginative way to do it.
Yeah. You just have to be a little bit creative. Um, so kind of like jumping off of that, at what point does it stop being D&D and D and start being a completely different game using D&D mechanics? Does it ever?
I think D&D, again, I said this earlier as far as the terminology, but I think D&D can be painted in such a broad stroke that it refers less to the game and more the style of sitting around and rolling dice with your friends and, telling a collective story and playing a collective game. Because, I mean, of the big kind of things, you got D&D, you got Pathfinder, which is kind of the same thing, but most people that are not like in those groups just refer to all of it as like a broad spectrum D&D or role
Phoenix.
playing game. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. The same argument.
Yeah, I feel like if you're looking for like where does it technically stop being D&D and start being something else, when you start changing the rules up a bit. And that sometimes that's required. Sometimes you want to do something like that. But you could theoretically apply D&D rules and mechanics to any setting. You can apply it to prehistoric dinosaurs and things like that. Maybe your spells are, supernatural-esque dinosaurs that spit fire or something,
I'll be a dinosaur
Yeah.
wizard.
You could be summoners and summon different dinosaurs.
That too.
I just want to be a Velociraptor. Now with your little hat.
Just have a little Velociraptor skull hat.
Yeah. Oh, fun times. So have either of you like run something that was non-standard?
I point back to the example I made earlier in high school with like the Zoids thing. I mean,
Zoids.
that was very, yeah, it was interesting. It was fun. But stuff like that focused mainly on battles. It didn't focus a whole lot on like RP elements.
Mhm.
So that was the difference there. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I was the one running the game for that Star Wars one I was talking about.
I've heard about that. What I've heard is extremely thorough.
Well, there is an actual like Star Wars tabletop D&D, but the one I used, basically, I just changed some of the skills to stuff that would apply to like Star Wars, like
Oh, you
vehicle
made
handling
yours.
was piloting and things like that. Yeah, it was literally just I took the rules of D&D 5e and I made them Star Warsy.
Yeah, I mean, you still get your base like check, so make like a deck save or a dex check, or make this, make that. You just like reflavor tooltips, so to speak.
Yep.
For lack of better terms.
Yeah, because
But-
I don't know, somebody did tell me about like a fan-made Star Wars D&D setting, which is just like apparently a work of art. I haven't looked at it myself, but
I'd have to look into that. That sounds like fun.
I'm sure you can find like almost pre-built campaign modules for just about like anything you want to do. I mean, they have all sorts of like Kickstarters for modules that exist outside of the D&D realm. I mean, even look at like Critical Role, where it started outside of the D&D like realm of things, but still kind of in that same fantasy. So I mean,
yeah, it had the vibes, but it wasn't straight from the books, as it were.
Yeah.
I feel like almost having some non-standard stuff is standard for D&D.
You almost want to create that yeah, it's telling a story. I mean, sometimes you have those weird zany moments, like all of a sudden this dragon was invisible and following you through the streets, and you accidentally walk into it, and 2 episodes down the road it's your friend, and you're planning to get his children back that were kidnapped by a giant decomposing bear. And yeah,
Such a good side quest.
you have that level of outlandishness that you create all the dynamic elements of storytelling, such as your reason as to why you're doing what you're doing. But sometimes it's more fun when it's extremely more flavorful.
It's silly. What do you think, Jake?
I think D&D in and of itself is just, it's meant to be a playground, you know? Here's the jungle gym, here's what it looks like, here's all the pieces that are constructed in a way for you to play on. You could pretend you're going across the monkey bars over a lake of lava, or maybe it's, just the ground. The joy of D&D for me is that you can make it whatever you want. And that's what I like about that as a module, as opposed to other modules I've tried, where their rules are really more stuck in whatever setting that they're in.
Interesting.
Just want to also add to that. I mean, if I remember correctly, even the player's handbook for the rules, one of the things that states in there is that this is just a loose guideline as to the representation of the game. So I mean, the rules themselves dictate that, hey, have fun, create your setting, do what you want to do. If you want to be pirates that are sailing on a ship in space, do it. Yeah. Although that can technically be considered a D&D, in canon realm as well.
Yeah, isn't there canonically like a pirate captain who's an illithid who like has a space ship?
Oh, I was thinking of what's it called? I can't remember the name of it, but there's like a way between realms in space where like magic is really volatile, and like, something about the souls of people who don't, are not claimed by a deity get stuck into this area. And, so it's like really dark and twisted.
Space purgatory.
More or less, you become like a wall for the boundaries of this area.
That's so cool. I actually didn't know about that.
You got me. My D&D canonicity is very rough and rusty.
Yeah, like I said, it was a pretty interesting thing I read up, but that felt within the realm of D&D, but still the concept is there. I mean, even something, it's like, I want to say, I think what captures the best like representation of what D&D should be, so to speak, actually isn't even a D&D game, but more or less the Treasure Hunter movie.
Oh.
So like the feel of what you get, from that experience, I think is what you're looking for when you do something like D&D. You're looking for that kind of like storytelling pacing.
All that.
Yep.
D&D is all about the zaniness. Genuinely, it pretty much is. Cool beans. So, question, with the canonization in like vanilla D&D stuff like artificers and guns and like Warforged and certain kinds of like arcanotech, so where's the line these days between like vanilla D&D and steampunk? Is there a line? Is D&D just steampunk now?
I don't think it's steampunk. I mean, it's hard to say there's a line. It depends on what you want to play. I mean, if you want to go play like an Adventure League campaign, a Adventure League official rule, then, you work within those parameters. But if you want to play a game where, there's light switches and you flip a switch and the light turns on, then, play that game. I mean, the line is wherever you want to set it.
I mean, I feel like the brilliance of both a more like steampunk and more fantasy setting is that the ideas that you can have for one aren't necessarily exclusive. You just have to reskin them. Taking like the light bulb, like pulling a switch and turning on a light. What if you turn on a switch and that activates a light cantrip in a rock in the ceiling or whatever? You can do things like that. So for me, the line is very much blurred between steampunk and D&D, because in a way steampunk kind of is fantasy. It's I mean, if you look at like what steampunk, at least in my opinion, was originally, it's this sort of like Victorian England meets like excessive industrial revolution, like modern day technologies but industrial revolution style in Victorian England. you don't have a car, you have a horse-drawn cart, but the horse is a mechanical horse.
This seems so complicated.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what steampunk is to me. And for me, that's really just an offshoot of fantasy that has so much popularity. It's its own genre in a way. So, I mean, D&D and steampunk, I mean, just mesh them together. Why not?
It's already laid the groundwork on some of the later modules with even like the Warforge and the Artificers and Eberron.
Eberron is just D&D and steampunk.
Yeah, exactly.
And they had a baby.
Yep.
And even then, I mean, even if you're just playing vanilla Player's Handbook D&D, like, you could reskin a wizard to be a technology user. Like, it's easy enough. Like, their spell book is their, like, mechanics book on how they build their contraptions that are their spells.
See, I think that'll work better with like a prepared spell class, in all honesty. But yeah, the concept is still there. Because it's like, then you're using that book to like create, quote unquote, your spells. Like, you know, Artificers in that case, where you have like these injectors that you can apply to heal your,
champion.
you know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you just marry the wizard with the artificer, you kind of have a steampunk wizard, essentially.
Wizardificer. Yeah. I wasn't sure if that was going to work as I was saying it, but it worked. It worked. So what's like one non-standard setting that you really want to see a game in? Something a little bit out of the ordinary.
Gosh. I would love... This would be difficult because it doesn't really make sense with the mechanics of D&D. I would love to see a superhero D&D. Like, I know there's superhero... It's not that it doesn't not work, but I'm like thinking like, okay, well, what if your superpower is flying? Well, in D&D, flying is super broken, so it would have to be that you have the flight spell or an item that allows you to fly is essentially the equivalent. But like, how does that work at low levels? Like, you can't just fly at low levels.
You can be an Aarakocra.
I guess you could.
Yeah.
You could just be a reskinned Aarakocra, I guess, yeah. Have like a jetpack instead or something. I don't know. Or just have wings. You know, maybe your superpower is that you have wings.
If you're playing a setting like that, you might as well just, if your superpower is flying, just give it a fly speed. You know, you don't have to reskin a race. I mean, you can just add if that's what it's doing.
I suppose you could. Makes balancing it a little bit harder, I think, though.
True. I mean, I would rather want to see like going back to like a Final Fantasy VI type setting where, you know, it's like the Warring Kingdom route with the giant airships that you see flying around and, you know, the different like quote unquote like dark realms, so to speak, you know, stuff like that. You know,
interesting.
Give it kind of like a nice twist. It's like, okay, well, I've seen this city. Now, what does the city look like on the other side? So things of that nature.
Cool.
Something about riding in a giant airship across, everything. Yeah, it's like exhilarating.
You look down at it, you're like, ooh, you hear the wind going past your. I like ships and planes and stuff. That's cool. I remember in Serenity's game that she did for us. This was before she ran this game. Cory, not for you, for me and Jake. She had airships? Because I remember we got to, or my character at least got to the original city that we started in like a blimp / airship / something or other. Am I remembering that wrong? Are there airships in this campaign?
Yeah, we saw a
Oh, right. Yeah.
We also saw one in Dash, I think, too.
But they weren't. Yeah, so far, we're not like seeing them travel overhead.
Gobby wanted to steal one. Yeah.
We should have let him.
I mean, we might at some point.
Steal one?
You never know.
Okay. Sounds like fun. Okay, cool. So sort of like going back to what Jake was saying a little bit, you were saying, so what like settings do you think would be particularly challenging to reskin or to adapt to like the D&D mechanics?
I used it as an example earlier, but prehistoric D&D might be a little bit tough. Like, how do you use magic if you're doing dinosaurs? So you would have to still have like that sort of high fantasy concept, but prehistoric. Maybe instead of a staff, or maybe instead of a wizard, you're more of a shaman who commands the power of the elements, or something like that.
Find like precious gems on the ground that act as scrolls for spells. So like they have power stored inside, like rubies and stuff like that.
Yeah. Another one that I would love to see, but would also be really hard. As ironic as it is, would be like a high sci-fi. At some point you have to figure out, okay, well, if we have lasers, it's like, what's the point of an armor class? Like, that's just gonna right through you. So then you have to like.
Well, AC's also how good you are at dodging.
Yeah,
true,
I mean,
true.
That just doesn't like. Yeah,
I
your
meant,
AC
I meant more like
doesn't mean
space lasers and things like that. That just like blow up cities and things. But
I think
I just thought of something that would be really cool. Warhammer 40K D&D.
I mean, they kind of have like that, so to speak. I mean, with that scene with all the minis and everything. I mean,
well, I mean, yeah, but like I'm thinking more of like actual like a D&D style, not massive armies, but like a platoon of mismatched soldiers, being sort of soldiers of fortune in that universe.
Yeah. So I was thinking something along the lines of like like an Outlaw Star style campaign. Again, dating myself there, but it's like instead of visiting cities, you're visiting planets to accomplish things. And you have the complication as to you're pretty much traveling in an environment that if anything goes wrong, you're dead. And you're doing that more often than you're not doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the mechanics for that would be similar to having like an on the seas campaign.
Yeah.
You're in a boat either way. Yeah.
Yep, it's just, in a boat, you don't die right away, whereas in space, you're pretty much like gone.
Yeah, you got like 30 seconds. Unless you're a tardigrade, in which case you can last for a few years. Fun science facts. Okay, let's see. Okay, so completely forgot. Oh, okay. So like going off of the sci-fi concept of like having more of a sci-fi or even a modern world campaign, can you do like a mundane campaign, because like a non-magical campaign, because like in sci-fi there's no magic, in real life there's no magic, but D&D mechanics are so very tied towards the concept of like magic and things like that. Like can you tweak that the right way? Can you reskin it that hard?
For the martial classes, fairly easily, I feel. Like, I mean, that just comes down to like our barbarian's rage mechanic is just you know how to access that fight or flight response on a dime.
Steroids.
Maybe not. Magic becomes a little bit trickier, especially if you're saying like no high technology. No orb of instant blowing up or whatever, no grenades or thing. I mean you could reskin a fireball as a grenade, I suppose. But it does get a little more difficult, just the reskinning of it, if you say no high technology, like no, I can hack the system and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, you can even argue a spell like Fireball would be more applicable to like a Molotov cocktail than a grenade. In the sense of how, the distance that it covers and, the space that it affects. I mean, you can get around that with, without like saying high technology, so to speak, but it becomes a lot more complicated in that regard. I think, part of the cool aspect and fun aspect of D&D might just be embracing those magical aspects. And, if you have magic in a modern setting, so be it. I mean, you can explain it in like, a modern way. Like instead of shooting a fireball from your hand, you throw a bottle with a cloth in it.
And of course, urban fantasy is its own genre.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Neat. Okay. Well, that's our time. Does anyone have any closing thoughts?
play what you want to play, set the
Mm.
line where you want to set it, and have fun. If you want to
A
be a giant,
spaceship.
if you want to be a giant robot dog, be a giant robot dog. If you want to, shoot lasers from your eye and, that's your Eldritch Blast, you do you.
That's really cool. I kind of want there to be like an X-Man setting now.
Yeah, mutations, that's your, class, your magic and stuff like that.
Cool beans. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. Another beautiful Tuesday evening. Everybody who's watching, make sure to tune in next week for more interviews, more stuff, more recaps, more nerding out. Tune in on Friday to see what happens. Now the Quinn's not dead, and everybody's in a little bit of a pickle. Check out our Twitter, check out our store. We still got t-shirts and mugs and stuff. Check out our YouTube channel. We have all of our old episodes archived over there. And come to our Discord, of course. We still have memes, and we're still very desperate to speak to anyone. We're so lonely. And have a great night. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Adios.